Thank you. Question number 2, Graham Simpson.
To ask the Scottish Government what its response is to the reported claims by the Director of Shelter Scotland that it is gaslighting the country on housing when its budget condemns 10,000 children to lives trapped in the homelessness system.
Cabinet Secretary.
Well, the Scottish Government is doing everything in its powers to tackle homelessness, and the Minister for Housing regularly engages with local authorities on the housing pressures they are facing. We are making over £14 billion available to councils in 24-25, including £30.5 million to support work preventing homelessness and £90.5 million for discretionary housing payments mitigating cruel policies such as the bedroom tax. We are also investing £100 million in the multi-year Ending Homelessness Together Fund. Scotland has a strong rights record, indeed the strongest in the UK for anyone becoming homeless, and has led the UK in delivering more than 126,000 affordable homes since 2007.
Graham Simpson.
Thank you. Well, Alison Watson is not the only one to have lambasted Shona Robison's disastrous budget, which saw a 26% cut of nearly £200 million to affordable social housing. She said, quotes, "It's getting ever more desperate. We deliberately describe what's happening as a housing emergency. That's not empty words. What we're seeing is exceptional. The government says it's doing great things, but these are the facts and figures, and that's why I call it gaslighting." Her words. Cabinet Secretary, she's right, isn't she?
Cabinet Secretary.
Well, I have to say, Presiding Officer, the brass neck of a Conservative member of the Scottish Parliament coming here and trying with crocodile tears to say that they are concerned about levels of homelessness or the housing budget when they themselves, their party, has ensured that we are seeing a massive cut to our capital budget. And again, they're not interested in hearing the facts on this either, Presiding Officer, but it does inevitably
Cabinet Secretary, if you could just give me a moment, please. I know that members are passionate about the issues they bring to the Chamber, but I'm absolutely determined that we do treat one another with courtesy and respect. We cannot listen when we're shouting or commenting. Cabinet Secretary.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. It does have an impact on what we can do up here when the UK Government sees fit to cut our budget by 10% real terms fall over the next few years, and also taken an absolute axe to the financial transactions, which are important in our affordable housing supply. In saying that, Presiding Officer, we know that we have to do everything that we can within the budgets that we do have, and that's exactly why we have a record on developing affordable housing. Scotland's delivered over 40% more affordable homes per head of population than in England, and over 70% more than in Wales. We've protected the homelessness budget for the next financial year, despite the most challenging budgets during devolution. So I do appreciate that Shelter would wish to see us go further, but let's be very clear, Presiding Officer, that not one party in this chamber came forward with costist proposals about exactly what that would be.
Graham Simpson.
Well, the Cabinet Secretary's attack on me should be aimed at Shelter Scotland, because I quoted Shelter Scotland. Those were their words. So that was an absolutely disgraceful answer, I have to say. Because, Presiding Officer, homelessness is at an all-time high. There are 15,625 households in temporary accommodation. That's the highest on record. And Alison Watson said that promises by the SNP government to build more social housing look like a pipe dream. John Blackwood of the Scottish Association of Landlords said landlords have been warning for the past few years that the combination of anti-landlord rhetoric along with short-term ineffective policies are harming investment in private rented housing in Scotland. 3 councils have declared a housing emergency. The entire housing sector is saying there's a housing emergency. Can the Cabinet Secretary not admit that there is a housing emergency?
Cabinet Secretary.
Presiding Officer, I'm not one of the members that comes to this chamber to make personal attacks. And if the member thinks that delivering the financial context of which this government is a personal attack, perhaps it is because he feels quite sensitive about the record of his party within the UK government. But that's exactly why we will continue within the budget that we have to make sure that we will prioritise as far as we possibly can.
Cabinet Secretary, sorry, if I may, just confirm to all members that I will chair the meeting in the way that I see fit. I have already asked members to ensure that they treat one another with courtesy and respect, and I will continue to do so where required. Cabinet Secretary.
Presiding Officer, I've been shouted down by men on the Conservative benches for many a year. It hasn't put me off then, and it won't put me off today either, from providing the context that is required on this. We have made funding available of more than £14 billion to councils within 24-25, and within that we've committed £35 million for specific action to end homelessness and rough sleeping. We've also, of course, taken action on temporary accommodation. And that's exactly why we've seen the work, for example, on the acquisitions plan, investing at least £60 million in this financial year. So we will continue to do all that we can within the difficult circumstances that we have. And I would urge the member, even at this late stage, if he has any ability to influence the Chancellor, which I doubt, Presiding Officer, but he can actually help in what we are doing for housing and homelessness, and indeed other members can as well, by joining our call for the Chancellor to actually reinstate the budget that we've had in capital within the Scottish Government, and that will help with housing and homelessness.
I'm keen to ensure that members who wish to have the opportunity to put a question, I'd be grateful for concise questions and responses, and I call Kenneth Gibson.
The Cabinet Secretary has confirmed that over the last 17 years the Scottish Government has built more affordable homes per capita than other UK nations. Given that the Tories have cut Scotland's capital allocation by £1,600 million over 3 years, their council group leader in Edinburgh is keen on homelessness provision, but not in his ward, and London has seen a 76% fall in affordable housing stats this financial year under Michael Gove. Does she agree that it's the Tories who are gaslighting?
Well, the Scottish Government has led the UK in housing by delivering more than 126,000 affordable homes since 2007. Over 89,000 of those were for social rent. That includes almost 24,000 council homes. We do recognise, of course, Presiding Officer, that there is more to do on this. But again, I think that context and that delivery is an important fact to deliver to Parliament today. But that's, of course, why we've taken action in the past and will continue to take action. And I appreciate that Shelter has concerns and would like us to go further. We'll continue that dialogue with them, along with Crisis and others. But I would point to, for example, some of the other impacts on homelessness is, for example, around the local housing allowance, which has been frozen for 3 years by the UK Government, and which a recent report on Crisis said was one of the main drivers in homelessness last year.
Martin Whitfield.
I'm very grateful, Presiding Officer, and I'm glad the Cabinet Secretary has faith in the third sector who have pointed this out. And she's right to say that this is a country that's built on strong human rights records. So what would she say to the 9,860 children in temporary accommodation? You know, the foundational stones of Maslow's needs that is going to cause them problems later in their life. So what will she say to those children about when are they going to escape temporary accommodation, when are they going to have certain housing?
Cabinet Secretary.
Well, the increase in homelessness applications and the number of households, especially children, in temporary accommodation is concerning. It is, the member's absolutely right on that. But that's exactly why we have been taking actions on the recommendations of the Temporary Accommodation Expert Group. I mentioned previously, Presiding Officer, the work that we've been doing of investing at least £60 million this financial year in an acquisitions programme. That's why we've provided targeted funding for the local authorities with the largest percentage increases in temporary accommodation. But the member is quite right to point out that there is more to do on that, and that's exactly what the Government will continue to do next year.